The Night Sun of Florida. Part 1. The Drain Below. It was 2:47 a.m. when they pulled the body from the storm drain. Titusville police didn't issue a press release. No photos. No news. Just a whisper between dispatch radios that a man had been found near the Indian River Lagoon. His throat open like a second mouth, lips stained black and curled in a smile that didn't look like his own. They said it was a gator. One of the big ones that lurk in the canals during heat waves. But the body had no other wounds. No torn skin. No drag marks. And no blood. Not a drop. Just dry veins. A corpse that should have been a fountain. I was already on the way before the call came. Not because I heard it. I don't have a police scanner. I don't need one. I dream when they feed. And the dream I had that night started the same as it always does. The sound of cicadas in reverse. The scream of fluorescent lights flickering over concrete. I saw a man hunched over the brackish water, mumbling about satellites, whispering prayers in binary. Then came the rustling behind him, the hiss of breath that sucked more than exhaled. And the voice that followed. Your son isn't ours. Florida isn't what people think it is. They see beaches, spring breakers, old retirees walking toward the grave at a snail's pace. But that's only the surface. That's just the mulch to cover the roots. The real Florida is older than the maps. Older than the tribes. Older than the sun that tries to kill us every August. I've hunted them across this state for 15 years. I've followed them from the sugar swamps of Clewiston to the limestone caverns under Ocala to the sinkholes that never close south of Winter Haven. They never die. But they molt. And this season, they're molting again. I met Sheriff Bronson at a Dunkin' Donuts just off Route 1. He looked tired. Not because of age, but because of awareness. Like his eyes had seen something and refused to ever go fully shut again. You're him? He asked. Yeah, I said. I'm him. He handed me the report. Autopsy redacted. Photos blurred. Only one line stood out, handwritten in the margins. Pupil burned from within. Retinal scarring. Like he looked at something too bright. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't feeding like usual. They weren't hiding in the dark. They were starting to burn backwards. I went to the drain. It was just past the mangroves, along a path the city pretended didn't exist. You had to crawl through a barrier of palmettos that hissed as you pushed through them. And the mosquitoes back there didn't buzz, they clicked. The concrete mouth of the storm drain gaped open, wide enough to swallow a man, rimmed in graffiti that kept rewriting itself. I saw symbols. Old ones? Not occult. Not satanic. Astronomical. Charts of the night sky drawn in rust and blood. And in the very center of the drain, a slick, circular burn mark. The kind you'd expect to see beneath a telescope. Or a ritual. Inside the tunnel, it was cold. Florida doesn't do cold. But in there, the air had the weight of a hospital freezer. The walls were wet, not with water, but something thicker. I found scratches. Fingernails dragged across the slime like someone tried to climb out after they'd already been pulled too deep. And the smell. God. It was copper and mildew and bleach and rot in reverse. Like something had sucked the death back out of something long dead. That's when I saw the first nest. It looked like a wasp hive. made of spit and sand and woven hair. Pulsing. Alive. Inside it a body. Curled. Naked. Pale. But not a corpse. The skin was too perfect. The mouth slightly parted, revealing flat white teeth. Too flat. Not fangs. Filters. And when I stepped closer, it opened its eyes. Not like a person waking up. Like a sensor detecting motion. "You're early," it said. "And you're thirsty," I replied. It didn't move. Didn't speak again. But I saw its chest rising. Saw its fingers twitching like they were remembering what grasping meant. I pulled my knife, silver-honed, edge-blessed in 3 churches and 2 gas stations where holy men died with their eyes open. I didn't ask. I didn't wait. I plunged it into the thing's throat and felt the blade freeze inside the skin. Not break. Not burn. Freeze. Like the blood inside it wasn't liquid anymore. Like it had become something colder. The body convulsed. Not in pain. In signal. And from deeper in the tunnel, I heard the others. Waking. Crawling. Slithering like snakes made of light. Their voices crawled up the walls in patterns, whispering in star positions. The drain feeds us. The light above is a lie. We drink from the false sun. I ran. I had to. Because that wasn't just a nest. It was a spire. One of the 13. And it meant the night sun was rising again. You don't understand what that means. But you will. Because they're not hiding anymore. They're adapting. Drinking not just from blood, but from memory. From heat. From our sun. These aren't the old vampires. Not the castle-dwelling, cape-wearing caricatures. These are solar parasites. Bloodlight ghouls. And they've lived beneath Florida long enough. Now they want daylight. And tonight? They're burning through. Part 2, Sunlit Thirst. I didn't stop running until I hit the car. Sweat poured down my back like I'd been bathing in salt water, not fear. My lungs burned. Not from exertion, from the cold I carried back from that tunnel. The drain had left something inside me. I felt it slithering through my ribs, coiling like frostbite. I tried to puke it out. All that came was light. A soft, amber flicker across my vision as I bent over, dry heaving onto the pavement. Behind me, the mangroves rustled. Nothing stepped out. But I knew they were watching. Sheriff Bronson called me the next morning. His voice cracked like a radio signal half stolen by static. "We've got another." "Where?" "Playa Linda Beach." "Broad daylight?" "Yeah." He didn't say anything else. Didn't have to. That was the message. The body was female. Mid-20s. Skin the color of paper and shade. No visible wounds. No struggle. Just collapsed beneath a lifeguard station like she'd gone to sleep mid-stride. They found her teeth scattered around her like petals. Not pulled. Not broken. Shed. Like a snake skinning its fangs. The coroner's report hadn't come in yet, but I didn't need it. There were burn marks under her nails. Charcoal patterns along her spine. Solar veins. She'd been feeding too long. And not from blood. From exposure. Here's what no one understands. These things, they're not vampires in the way you think. They don't hate sunlight. They covet it. They're evolving. The old ones? Yeah, they withered in the sun, turned to ash at dawn. But these new ones, they drink it, convert it, turn solar radiation into hunger. And Florida? It's their Eden. A state where summer never ends, where tourists tan themselves raw, where bodies bake on beaches like offerings on altars. They love it here. And now, they're stepping out of the dark. I tracked the heat trail east. It wasn't hard. They leave traces, like ultraviolet bruises no one else can see. I followed it from Playa Linda up through the Space Coast, along old boardwalks and cracked causeways, into neighborhoods half swallowed by swamps. That's where I found the first mirrorless house. It looked abandoned. Windows blacked out with insulation tape. Screens over the vents. But inside? Candles. Books bound in glass. A solar lamp, burning inward toward a bed covered in leather and ash. And on the wall, scrawled in red chalk, "When the real sun dies, ours will rise." There were bodies in the basement, still breathing, strapped to old recliners, eyes sewn shut with wire, skin peeled to let the heat in. And hanging above them, rotating slowly, was a chandelier made from magnifying glasses and halogen bulbs, all aimed at the flesh, cooking it gently. They weren't being tortured. They were being transformed, conditioned, prepared to walk under a sun that doesn't exist yet. One of them spoke. Barely. Voice like sand in a blender. "Don't stop it. The light hurts now, but we're getting used to it. He's coming. The Daydrinker. He'll teach us." I left them. Burned the house behind me. Watched the windows explode as something screamed without lungs from the foundation. And I knew then what this really was. Not an outbreak. Not a nest. A movement. That night, I broke into the old Canaveral launch facility. It's been shut for years. Everyone thinks NASA left it behind. They didn't. They buried it. And they left something inside. The deeper I went, the colder it got, not from lack of AC, but from presence. A reverse heat, like the soul of fire being sucked away. And at the lowest level, I found the altar. Yes. Altar. Circular. Metal. Built from sun mirrors and blackened bones. And at its center a plaque. Project Nocturna, Solar Leech Interface Test, terminated. But the lights were on. And the cameras blinked red. And the blood on the floor was fresh. Someone had reactivated the program. Someone had turned on the machine again. I watched the monitors. Dozens of them. All aimed at cities. Streets. Beaches. Every one of them watching the shadows of people who weren't casting them. And one screen was labeled Daydrinker active. A photo flickered on the screen. For a second, I saw his face. Or something close. Hair like sun-bleached vines. Skin like mirror glass. Eyes that didn't reflect anything. And lips that pulled apart like curtains. He smiled. And all the cameras turned to me. I barely escaped. Tunnels collapsed behind me. Sirens screamed in a pitch I'd only heard once, during an eclipse in 2008, when 6 men jumped into the sea in Miami and were never found again. I ran until my legs gave out. Woke up hours later on a stranger's dock, covered in sand and sweat and sunburn I didn't earn. and in my bag tucked beneath my gear, the glass-bound book I found in the tunnel. Only now, it had pages, each one covered in diagrams, feeding charts, migration patterns, names, mine, yours, cities, targets. They're not waiting for the night anymore. They're making their own sun. A false star, grown beneath the ground, powered by the heat of 1,000 stolen bodies. And when it rises, it won't bring warmth, only thirst, and light that drinks you. Part 3, The Daydrinker. I fled north. Not because it was safer, nothing's safe now, but because I needed distance. Space between me and the machines, between me and the heatless light that still clung to my skin like regret. I drove through towns with boarded-up windows and sunbathers who didn't blink, who only turned their heads as I passed like sunflowers. There are whole neighborhoods now where no one sleeps. Not because of crime. Because they can't. The light inside them won't allow it. They call him the Daydrinker. I used to think it was a title, something whispered by a cult of sunsick followers who'd spent too long under heat lamps and stolen UV rays. But he's real. More than real. He's awake. And every hour, he becomes less like a myth and more like a broadcast. Something you can feel over your shoulder during high noon. Something that walks beside your shadow when it stretches too long across pavement. Something that whispers, just behind your eardrum. You don't need to blink anymore. I met a woman in Palatka. Her name was Cora. She ran a backwoods gas station that hadn't changed since the 70s. No security cameras. No smart bulbs. No reflective surfaces. She wouldn't let me in until I showed her my teeth. Not to count them. To prove they were dull. Not growing. Not translucent. And when I passed the test, she pointed to a cooler behind the counter. Inside were syringes filled with something thick and silver. Mercury, she said. They hate it. Can't digest it. Wrecks their insides. You see one blinking too slow? Jab them in the gut. She had a wall of Polaroids. Dozens of sun-stained portraits of people, most smiling, some not. All with burns along their temples. Each photo labeled in Sharpie. Before the turn, I found my own face among them. It was taken 2 days ago. The book keeps changing. Each morning I wake, and it's heavier. The glass binding is gone now, replaced with something that looks like fused coral and satellite dishes. Its pages don't flutter, they shiver. I try to stop reading, but it opens itself, and it shows me more. Feeding patterns, expansion schedules, solar maps layered with blood routes, like ley lines formed from thirst. And always the same recurring phrase. Florida first, then the world by light. They don't come at night anymore. They don't have to. The sun is no longer a threat. It's a meal. They walk freely now. No hoods. No fear. Just smiles that glint with too many teeth and sunglasses that hide the absence of eyes. At 2:19 p.m. in Gainesville, a man collapsed in the middle of a crosswalk. People rushed to help. But when they turned him over, his body dried in real time, skin collapsing, lips splitting, eyes shriveling like grapes on a stovetop. His shadow remained. Even after his body was gone. Even after the street was clean. It still stretches there. A stain that doesn't follow the sun. I made it to the lab outside Micanopy by dusk. Hidden deep in the scrub forest, behind a fence that sparks at the touch, is what's left of Project Nocturna, a joint venture between the state, a private defense contractor, and something older. They tried to weaponize the vampires. They failed. Instead, they released them. The Daydrinker was born there, in their mock sun chamber. The data logs still play. Asterisk. Subject A7. Rapid photonic adaptation. Asterisk. Asterisk. Ocular development, non-reflective. Asterisk. Asterisk. Hunger response, constant. Asterisk. Asterisk. Containment, ineffective. Asterisk. One audio file ended in screaming. Not human. Something deeper. Like a throat that had never made sound before suddenly learning how to love it. Inside the vault, I found a wall map. Florida, but fractured. Split into 13 zones. Each one marked with a glyph that pulsed red when I stared too long. The keys were labeled. Wells. 13 points of origin. Feeding stations. Or nests. The drain in Titusville. The solar altar at Canaveral. The girl at Playa Linda. Each one a part of the grid. And in the center, a spiral of numbers. Coordinates. It pointed to the Everglades. Of course it did. Because that's where the sun dies earliest. And that's where they're building the second sun. I saw it. Only for a moment. But it was enough. From a fire tower on the edge of Big Cypress, I watched as the swamp opened like a mouth. And beneath the surface, a sphere of light pulsed. Artificial. Contained. But growing. Above it floated bodies, naked, hairless, eyes burned out, slowly spinning like meat in a microwave. Each one whispering, "We are his satellites. We orbit his hunger. We burn so you don't have to." I ran again. Not out of fear. Out of certainty. Because I know now. The Daydrinker isn't feeding anymore. He's reproducing. The light he gives isn't just radiation. It's conversion. Every person caught in it for too long becomes a receiver. And every receiver becomes a sun. And every sun burns not to illuminate, but to consume. I don't know how long we have. Days? Hours? But I know this. The sun we see isn't ours anymore. It belongs to them. And the more we bask in it, the more we invite the burn. Part 4: Cities of the Blistered. They came at noon. Not like before, not in whispers or slow turns, not from beneath drain covers or hollow trees. This time, they walked the streets like they'd always belong. In daylight. In plain sight. In bodies that weren't quite their own anymore. I was in Tampa when the first building screamed. Not exploded, screamed. A sharp, wet sound that echoed from every pane of glass like the city itself was trying to shatter out of its skin. And then they poured from the windows. Dozens of them. All dressed like us. But not breathing. Not blinking. Each of them glowing faintly beneath the collarbones. A soft, inner light pulsing under paper-thin skin. Daydrinker's children. The new sons. I tried to run. The street was full of people watching. Just watching. Not running. Not hiding. They weren't shocked. They were waiting, like they'd been promised something. And now it was arriving. I bumped into a man standing still on the sidewalk, face toward the sun, eyes closed. He smiled at me and opened his mouth. No teeth. Just light. I ducked into a parking garage, gasping. The air tasted burned. Plastic and citrus. Like the sun itself had peeled something off the sky. I found a car. Hot-wired it. Drove blind for 20 miles west, through smoke and heat shimmers and old neon signs that read, "Welcome to the new light. Reflect and be remade. No shade. No sin." Radio stations bled together. Every channel broadcasting the same signal. Not words, not music. Just static with a heartbeat underneath. Like something asleep in the static was dreaming me back. I made it to the coast by nightfall. It didn't help. The sun never set. I stood on the edge of the gulf and stared at the sky. Orange. Pulsing. Wrong. Like it was being kept alive by a machine. And across the water, in the distance, a new star was rising. Not in space. In Florida Bay. It cast no shadow. It warmed nothing. It just watched. I contacted the last of my network. Hunters. Priests. Scientists. Madmen. Most were already gone. Some answered, but their voices were wrong. Words too smooth. Too slow. One of them, Kenzie, messaged me from a darkroom in Delray. "They're in the mirrors. They don't need reflections anymore. They make them. If you see your face where it shouldn't be, run." She went silent after that. Her last photo was of a bathroom sink. The reflection in the mirror was smiling. Her face was crying. I returned to Palatka. Cora was waiting. Her shop had become a bunker, lead-lined, mercury-sealed, every window mirrored inward. She handed me a bag of syringes and pointed to a map on the wall. "There's only one way to kill light," she said. "You feed it darkness, not shadow. Absence." She showed me the path, a swamp west of Homestead, where the Daydrinker's original corpse had been buried. The one the state thought it burned. The one the project thought they erased. "He never died," she said. "He just dreamed long enough to wake up new." I drove through towns that no longer had clocks. Lights burned constantly. Shadows didn't fall right. They drifted upward, like gravity had been rewritten. People laughed at nothing, sang in perfect harmony. Children hummed the two-tone whistle that used to be a warning. Now it was a welcome. I reached the swamp by midnight. But the sky was still orange. The stars no longer twinkled, they glared. And at the center of the swamp, surrounded by trees that had turned translucent, was a clearing. At its center, a mouth. Not a cave. A mouth. Teeth made of bone-white coral. Lips of scorched mud. Breathing. In and out. And from deep inside it, the Daydrinker's voice. "Come in, Eli. You're the last Nightwalker. You carry the old blood. You still remember how to sleep." I stepped inside. The air vanished. No light. No noise. Just absence. And then, a scream. Mine. Not from pain. From memory. Everything I'd forgotten slammed into me at once. My brother, gone at the edge of a lake. my mother's eyes glowing before she vanished beneath the bed. The way the first son had died, and how no one remembered it. How Florida had always been a nest. A state shaped like a fawn, pointed downward, toward what sleeps below. I opened the book. It was blank, except for one final instruction. To end the light, become the night. I understood. To kill the Daydrinker, I had to drink what he could not. The absence. The dark that existed before creation. The thing without reflection, without source. Not evil. Just empty. I took the last syringe. It wasn't mercury anymore. It was void. I stabbed it into my heart. Everything went cold. Then hot. Then black. And then I opened my eyes. But they weren't mine anymore. They held no light. Only hunger. Not for blood. Not for sun. But for quiet. Part 5. No more dawns. The sun died at 3:37 a.m. Not all at once. Not with fire or fanfare. It simply stopped. A flicker in the sky, like a blown fuse. A ripple across the clouds that turned orange into ash. And then darkness. Pure. Deep. Final. Florida went still. The insects stopped mid-chirp. The tides held their breath. And across the state, every new sun, the Daydrinker's children, the mirror-skinned wanderers, began to scream. But not out of pain. Out of hunger. I walked out of the Everglades barefooted, dripping with swamp water and silence. The book was gone. Melted. Absorbed. Its final page had written itself across my skin, a spiral of sigils carved in absence, visible only under what remained of the false light. I didn't need it anymore. I was the book now. The last page. The binding. The cover no one could close. The Daydrinker had vanished. Fled? Burned? No. He had dispersed. Dissolved into the light he gave, spread across reflections and satellite dishes and solar panel grids. But when the sun fell, so did he. And now there's nothing for him to hold on to. Only me. Only night. Cities burned. Not from flame, from panic. A world built on schedules, time zones, tanning salons and photosynthesis doesn't survive when dawn doesn't come. Hospitals lost power. Phones went dead. The stars came back in full, not twinkling, but watching. And the Daydrinker's army turned on itself. They couldn't find the light anymore. Couldn't bask. Couldn't thrive. They began to rot in reverse, bodies unmaking themselves, turning into steam, folding into mirrors and vanishing like breath held too long. I walked through it all. Immune. Unnoticed. They didn't see me as prey anymore. They saw me as eclipse. The thing that ended their story. The last whisper of shade. In Orlando, I found a church half swallowed by vines. Inside, survivors sat huddled. Eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Candles burned at the edges of the room, but no one sat near them. They feared the flame. Rightly so. One of the false ones still lurked in the corner, curled like a fetus, whispering prayers to the Daydrinker in tongues that sounded like sunlight fizzing in water. I walked over, touched its forehead. It looked up at me. And for a moment, it was human again. Then it turned to dust. Word spread. They started calling me Nocturne, a name born from rumor, panic, all. They whispered that I walked without a heartbeat, that I drank shadows and vomited time. Some tried to follow me. Most got lost. Because the path I walk isn't made of road or dirt or map. It's made of what was forgotten. The alleys where light never reached. The corners of dreams. The holes between seconds. In the final hours, the last of the Daydrinker's voice echoed one more time. Through a radio left on in a gas station. Through the glass of a darkened phone screen. Through a puddle rippling with oil. You needed me. You built me. I was your addiction to glow. Your war against sleep. You opened the sky and begged it to never close. And now you've remembered the dark. You've remembered what watches. Good night. Then silence. No sun rose the next morning. Because morning doesn't exist anymore. Time still ticks, but the sky remains empty. A calm, black dome where stars flicker like old memories trying not to die. Florida survives. Changed. Cooled. Returned to a place of marsh and myth and moon. Some pray for the sun to return. But most are learning to see in the dark. As for me, I still walk. Still carry the sigils beneath my ribs. Still bleed ink when I sleep. Still hear the whistle that no longer lures the hungry, but warns the living. And somewhere, beyond the last swamp, I know there's a place untouched by light. The true night. The one from before. The one that fed even the first suns to the void. And I am going there. Because something calls me. Not with light. Not with heat. But with a single word, spoken without sound. Rest. The end. Or the long night between the next two suns. Global Solar Index, null. Daydrinker status, extinct. Nocturne active. The dark, reclaimed.